We're here at your beautiful nursery, and I like to think of these places as ecological restoration centers more than just a place that's we're growing plants or just farming plants that people might eat and be done with or put in the ground and never think about again. I think all of these plants are creating ecosystems for the
Yeah,
future.
that's how we like to think about it too. We also think of it as a living laboratory because we're learning a lot by growing these plants in these gardens. It's a way for us to observe which plants are performing well in these soils and learning about the plant pollinator relationships, and also learning how to take care of these gardens, how to manage them so that we can share with the industry and clients uh, more of the specifics and the practicality of how do you create these spaces and how do you care for them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen a lot of the butterflies. We've already started capturing a lot of that. You were talking with me as we were walking around before about how you were testing sort of for the monarch butterfly host plants as well as nectar. And as I was talking with our friends here, we literally saw a monarch butterfly fly sipping the nectar to your sort of validating what you've been doing here. So I think what I like to kind of step back on is your motivational system. Why are you doing all this?
Well, it's fun. You know, it's fun to innovate and to be engaged in purposeful work. Uh, we are ornamental landscape and nursery business. My parents started the business 40 years ago, and we were doing well selling plants to the landscape industry. But as I was learning more and more about the industry, I realized that although it calls itself the green industry, it's not environmentally friendly. Unfortunately, the choices that we have made over the decades in Florida have led us to a landscaping plant palette and a landscaping model that uses a lot of inputs. It uses a lot of water, it uses a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, and we know that those things can be really harmful to the environment. And they're also very sterile in terms of life. They don't support local pollinators. They don't support the local wildlife because we've started using a lot of non-native plants, exotic plants that come from other parts of the world. And while they're beautiful plants, they're simply not adapted to our local ecology. So we end up with biodiversity deserts. And in Florida, we have a lot of population growth, and we have something important to protect here. It's a biodiversity hotspot designated by the United Nations as such because it has over 2,500 endemic species of native plants that only exist here.
Wow.
And more than 70% of the land in Florida is threatened by development. So that means that we stand to lose a lot of this biodiversity. And once it's gone, it's really hard to get back.
So, speaking of development, driving around visiting all of these native nurseries and trying to help bring technology to this movement, state-of-the-art AI, I've really been forced to observe these housing projects scattered across the state that to me look like nuclear wastelands of, destruction. And you sort of keenly aware that there'll be this like thick forest of local native pines, and then it just suddenly stops and turns into like concrete and these sort of 1950s cookie cutter grasses that you can tell are not adapted, that are struggling, that are on life support, I think, as you said before. And what I love about your story, very, very special story for the state and for, someone who's actually been pioneering this for a very long time, leading a very large group of people across nonprofit, public, private, is that you don't just talk this talk, you've actually set up industrial processes to scale and to demonstrate solutions at scale. And even further, you've been involved in major developments of housing projects that have actually demonstrated that we can have a different model for that.
Yeah, that's right. We're interested in scaling this to have an impact at the state level because that's what's needed to kind of shift the direction that we're heading in terms of how our developments impact our natural resources. There are more than 1,000 people that move to Florida every day, and that's been going on for decades, and it will continue to happen. So how we develop our communities is important, but it's kind of like, what is it that you're solving for? And that's going to lead you down the road and determine what types of solutions you come up with. I think there might be something similar in AI, but the home building industry is solving for mass production at the lowest possible cost per square foot of housing. And so they mass clear the land, they put in the cheapest ground cover that they can, and they try to build the largest house that they can for the lowest cost possible.
Have we just sort of let McDonald's type projects just take over the state? Is that kind of, because this is all like the lowest, sort of inferior services?
Well, I mean, some people think that that's what they want. They want a 4,000 square foot house, and so they pay for the house, and they can't afford to reinvest in the ecology of the land. But if you shift kind of your mindset to, well, let's solve for how do we create housing for people in Florida that is harmonious with our natural environment, that supports the preservation of our natural systems, which truly is the reason why they're moving here in the first place. And if we ask that question, then we start to find different solutions. And there are plenty of very reasonably attainable solutions for doing that. And that's
Right.
why we're seeing developers and municipalities come on board and adopt these practices, because we've been able to show them that it's not more expensive.
Right.
It's just that it required a broadening kind of our aperture as to what it is that we need to solve. It's more than just providing cheap housing for people.
Right.
It's also protecting our natural resources and creating vibrant ecological systems in our communities.
Yeah, so I would say it's not more expensive, it's more intelligence that we need in what we're doing. And what's fantastic about the AI revolution is that we're sort of, I think, some of the leaders like to say, we want to create so much intelligence that we don't even bother to measure how much intelligence we're creating or giving away, because that's what we can get with the computers. And so, just to kind of pinpoint something that I've always been wondering and ask you this question, do you feel like if we, let's take some of the best landscape designers that you've ever came across and the way that they kind of see the ecology and aesthetics, and, if we were to somehow, effectively kind of, I want to use the word mass produce, but I want to be clear that do so in partnership with these leaders, that we're sort of empowering their creativity, we're expanding their capacity to design and to properly impact the environment and create environments we love. What do you see out of that? Do you think that could unlock potentially something really big for this movement?
The most successful and the most talented landscape architects that I've come across have always been those who were thinking in terms of ecology and horticulture and whole systems. On some level, a landscape architect can simply concern themselves with, drawing a pretty picture and making the landscape look beautiful. And beauty is important, but there's much more to the field than just the aesthetics.
We were talking about Peter Dolph earlier today,
Mm-hmm.
and how Thomas Rayner
Mm-hmm.
commented in an email that I was really proud to receive from him, that he was saying people interpret the ecological functionality as the source of the beauty.
I think so. I think that we're all attracted to healthy, functioning ecosystems. It's why people go to national parks. It's why they go to the springs. It's why they like to go for hikes. They naturally feel at peace, at ease. They recognize the harmony in the living system, even though they maybe can't put words to it.
If people were here, you could feel it where we are right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can hear the
you've got this
insects.
great oak tree,
Yeah.
but also behind us we have several of these biodiverse environments that it just feels nice to be in, basically.
You see the birds, you see the pollinators. It tells you this is a healthy place and where life thrives. And we want to bring life back into the landscape,
Right.
as opposed to viewing the landscape as a static thing that's something just that you look at, that maybe is a postcard of what you think Florida should look like. No, we want the landscape to be alive, and there is a lot of abundance to living systems, and that's something that I've learned just by working in these gardens and observing what happens when you get the right mix of plants and healthy soils. The landscape really starts to generate a lot of value over time because you're building soil health underground, which helps to improve the health of the plants. As the plants get healthier, you're attracting more wildlife, more pollinators. And so it starts to feed on itself in a virtuous cycle of life that is essentially creating abundance. And we see that also in the cost, because the landscape management costs are going down over time as the landscape becomes more abundant and richer and more complex. It starts to take care of itself. So you don't have to weed as much, you don't have to prune as much, you don't have as many pest problems in your landscape. Whereas if you look at the alternative, like the conventional model of landscaping, the costs only increase over time.
Yep.
And so it's really a different approach, but one that I think is going to attract a lot of supporters, because when you come into this space, most people acknowledge that, yes, this is a space I feel good in. I could imagine this around my home. It's beautiful, it smells good, it sounds good, and then you get just the magical moments of seeing, a butterfly or bird or some other form of life interacting with your space.
Right, but you get all of that, but also, you're addressing some of these bigger issues. And so I think just to kind of build with you for a second, and I know we don't have much time here, so, just to I wanted to kind of make sure I asked you directly, if we're speaking directly to, let's say, policymakers or people who are looking at, do you think policies should be driving this forward, or do you think this is purely, let's create this solution in the free market and actually just build the thing that people want as well at the same time as solving the environmental problems? Because you talk about that sometimes.
I think that policy can play a role in this, but I'm not going to hitch my train to that, because I think we can build a better model. We can make it less expensive. We can make it more beautiful. We can make it richer in life and more abundant, and we can save on resources like water.
And increase the land value.
So it's just a matter of designing a model that you can then share with stakeholders and explain to them how this meets their best interest. And that's why the Outside CoLab is really sought to be collaborative and multidisciplinary, so that we can understand, well, what is the home builder looking for out of all this? What's the homeowner? What are their goals and needs?
Right.
What about the municipality and the landscape industry professionals? If we can understand what their current needs and goals are out of the landscape, then we can try to design this alternative model in such a way that it does a better job of meeting those goals and needs than the conventional. And when we do that, people will adopt
solution. It's like the Tesla.
The Tesla's a better car for, at least a lot of people feel that way. And I think that we can do the same thing here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, okay, so for like the last few questions, one is basically, I wanted to make sure I asked you sort of your frontier, you get to sort of supercharge AI technology, plus, all the human networks of expertise, and, just you get to kind of be the magician and design the future for us for a second, to do it whatever you think. So what would you like to see? What's your sort of magic dream for the future where everything is kind of modeled, and what does that look like for you if you take that far?
Well, I think we have a pretty good idea of what a sustainable ecological landscape in Florida looks like. The real challenges to scaling this are the expertise and knowledge at the design side, and then at the maintenance or management side. So the two bookends of the spectrum. It has to be designed properly in order for it to work, and it has to be managed correctly. And there is a gap in industry knowledge in both of those areas. So if AI can help us to close that gap and to make this knowledge more widespread and available, then we'll be able to scale more quickly and to transform a greater number of acres, greater number of landscapes in a shorter amount of time.
Perfect. Okay, and then last question is, I just kind of want to give you a chance to kind of express anything else that you'd like the world to know about what we're doing here.
Hey, I think there's a lot of really good causes out there that people can be a part of. And I think for me, it's been really wonderful to be able to contribute to something that I find to be purposeful and meaningful. I think everybody benefits on some level from being connected to a big mission. And to be able to think about how we can transform Florida landscapes and maybe beyond Florida in a way that benefits the environment, that benefits communities and people, is just a great way to align our business. And I've been blessed and fortunate to be in a situation where I can find that intersection of our business needs and the way that we can build and grow a profitable business while also doing something, that's exciting and something that is good.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lance.
Yeah, cool. All right, wonderful.